Well, welcome to Human Meet Machine, the meetup that talks about the interactions between humans and machines. The mission of this meetup is to build a diverse community, both technical and non-technical professionals, and we'll get into that a little bit today, that supports people on the beginning of their AI journey as well as throughout their journey. My goal, my mission is to help prepare the workforce for this fourth industrial revolution that is presently happening, helping people adapt and grow to meet this changing world. I also want to invite guests who are on the front lines of this topic and have an open dialogue with them so we can work through this together because this really is a team effort, and we'll talk about that today as to why that is. So, without further ado, let's get started with the meetup. We have an amazing guest today. I'm so excited for this one. I was secretly hoping he would reach out and volunteer to do this conversation, and he did. He read my mind. So let's get started. I'm going to have you introduce yourself, tell us your name, your location, what your current role is, and give us a brief career history. So we'll dig into the more finer details as we go through our conversation, but just kind of an overview of how you got here. So take it away.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Patty, for having me. So my name's Snehal, and I'm currently have my own company called Boostaro AI, and kind of how I landed here has been a journey. So I started my journey in bioinformatics. So those of you don't know bioinformatics, it's the cross section of bioinformatics, machine learning, deep learning, and computer engineering all together to solve, and that's what I did my studies in. And so. It's all started from there, having that background, and then slowly as I transitioned to different career options, I always loved working with people, and so that's where the agile bug bit me, and I kind of went into I was developing and doing all of these building machine learning based algorithms and whatnot, and then slowly kind of went into the agile route to help people understand how do we work in a collaborative way and hopped from one company to the other, from fintech all the way to biotech to fintech to government. And then that kind of eventually led me to start my own. And then almost like I would say around 2022, when actually ChatGPT came out, 2022, the Gen AI bug kind of also bit me at that point. And I kind of had seen ChatGPT before it even became ChatGPT. Was working with GPT 2 and 3, through a startup that I had just met. And when I first saw, I still remember that day vividly because Hyperwrite was the company, and they had introduced, Jason, one of the co-founders, said, "You got, like we were just looking into it, like what is the capabilities?" And ever since then, I think I have just gone with it. Um, but this slide here that Patty has kind of tells the story, right? Starting from machine learning to deep learning, and then around the 2020 we had Gen AI come to picture, with the transformer model being, the attention is all you need paper, kind of really transforming everything we see today. And then shortly after that, we started building, like, talking about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to building agents. Agents, I would say 2, 3 years ago was in its infancy stage. No one really knew about it, but now it's like the mainstream. It's taken front and center. And then we've, started talking about agentic RAG. And right now, the key thing is vibe coding versus agentic engineering. And these protocols are being built as well. A lot of people are still learning about MCP and how do you get agents to work together using different types of protocols. So there's just vast amounts happening, but in a nutshell, that's kind of how I landed. I think it's always been a continuous journey of, learning, building, and just continuously building. And that's kind of what's brought me to this stage. And I still don't know everything. I don't have all the answers, but I'm learning something every day. It's like something, and it's not just like a small thing. It's significant things that I'm learning every day. But it's like, and I'll give an example later in the conversation of like how one can actually keep up, right? And there's a big, beautiful analogy that Andrew Ying timely today shared it. I got to see it, I think, a couple months back when I met him. And I kind of take that Lego block approach, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue.
Yeah, excellent. And thank you for kind of talking through this slide. I saw you talk through this in your meetup a few months ago, and I shared this with my newsletter and I put it in a blog because this really visually reached out and grabbed me. It helped me understand where I was on this continuum. It helped me understand why I felt like I was so behind because the news is talking about the things in green where I'm still kind of in the orange and the red. So we'll dig into that. Let me stop sharing my screen. We'll dig into that a little bit in a bit. But I just wanted to call this out that you were the one that showed me this graphic. You created this, and I really appreciate it. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Um, so let's shift into the agile topic because that's like the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
right? When I first met you, this was through your meetup, and it was AI and Agile. And I was really fascinated on the connection between those. And you created a new framework. And then, you kind of put that down. The meetup kind of paused, and then you came back, and it was just purely AI. So I know we had a great chat a few weeks ago about why you shifted away from purely Agile or Agile totally into AI. But I wanted to like dig into that a little bit because you know, and the people in this audience know that I've publicly said my challenges with the Agile community, the divisiveness, the arguments, it's still happening today. I saw a post a couple of days ago, people still arguing about things in Scrum, and I'm like, come on, like, aren't we past this? So,
Yeah.
like, can you touch upon that? Like, explain your perspective on this?
Yeah.
Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of us in this room are feeling some of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the so I'll start with this, right? I was known as the AI Agile guy. I think that was like the biggest move for me, and it felt really difficult to do. I destroyed like I completely stepped away from that brand. And I have deep roots in Agile, right? I went into the career like, working as Agile delivery. I worked at Capital One where Agile happened, right? They brought it, but they were the first ones to cut it too. So I understand, Agile has been a big part of me, right? But when I actually made the decision to move away and rebrand myself, it was the toughest decision. I actually had, it felt really hard, but I had to do it. And I'll tell you why. I think the community in itself, like what struck me was when I first asked so many people, I was like, can you define Agile to me? Agile is so loosely kind of defined. The manifesto itself is open for interpretation, right? And so where we are today, like, and especially when I started exploring the AI space even deeper, I kind of felt like, okay, well, we can't really come to a conclusion of what agile is. Everyone kind of defines it differently. So those are great guidelines, and I still use some of the principles. I haven't forgotten, even though like my LinkedIn persona might be different. I still believe that, humans are centric to what we build. There's a lot of fear mongering, and what I found very tough was when I started the AI Agile Better Together whole concept. And that was my talk that I gave this talk around the world as, keynotes at conferences, that agile conferences. And, I did that for a year and I got great feedback and whatnot. But then I was like, I'm missing the point here, right? Like combining AI and Agile to me it sounded great, right? It's like, oh, let's create. And that's like actually because I was in the Agile space, I'll say when I first got introduced to Gen AI, that was the first thing. It's like, how can I use AI to create user stories? Or how can I use AI to automate Jira? But that's not the point, right? I think the point I asked after like kind of going deeper into my, deep thinking and thoughts, I was just like, we're missing the point here. We have to redesign and kind of reshift our mindset into leaning into AI and figuring out how do we leverage AI to kind of rethink from bottom up, right? I believe Agile Manifesto was created for software development, traditional software development, and it worked. It was great. But the era that we're in now is completely different, right? It hasn't been updated. And to the point, I think we talked about the Scrum expansion. I'll touch on that since it was brought up. But the Scrum expansion pack was released yesterday. But why do we need a guide in 2025? Right? Who's actually reading a 50-page document to figure out how am I going to work? Right? Like we are in an era where we're building agents and we're, building these very sophisticated building blocks to set up the future. Right? And if you're not, if to me it's like if you're not really learning how to build, right? And you're still, and that's why you see these debates happen. I would say most majority of the people who are having debates on LinkedIn are the ones who are not building. And I'm trying to kind of stay away from injecting myself because I feel like it's a waste of time almost. Because if people actually took this advice almost a year back, and I just posted about that, I think we would come far a ways. Like, every builder who built a year ago would probably be way advanced in terms of that spectrum we shared this, in just a few moments ago. You would actually move the needle forward, right? And to me, it's not stopping, right? It's not going to stop. There's going to be more things that come. And the only way to stay, kind of in tune is figuring out, okay, ChatGPT came, that's great. Everyone's still in their ChatGPT honeymoon phase, right? No one's really looking deeper into it by saying, hey, what are these models like for? I know majority of the people I asked, they couldn't tell like O3 is a reasoning model versus GPT-4o, etc. So it's really important to kind of dig deeper, right? Make your own chatbot. Leverage all the other frontier models, right? Start small. Get that small brick going, right? And then add these sophisticated building blocks to that same application to see how you progress. And to me, the agile, folks now blending AI agile is a hot topic right now, but I think we're missing the point, right? You could possibly generate 1,000 of those expansion guides using AI if you really wanted to. And I think you would find more insights that way, right? It's just, to me, it's just like, there's two sides. There's people who are still skeptics, and which is okay because I think it brings a good debate. But then there's also folks like me who just lean in and start building, and start experimenting. And I think the learning trajectory on the ladder is very high, right? If you start building and learning, because everyone's pace is different. My pace versus everyone's pace here would be different. But I think that's what's really important in this era is to really build yourself. It doesn't matter if you're a C-suite executive or if you're an engineer, a product person, a project manager, you can build today. And I've said that throughout my meetups. I know Patty's been to a few, and I see some others and I always say, just keep building because to me, the builders will win in this era, right? Because you'll learn exponentially. So I'll stop there. Hopefully, I answered that question. I know I went on a tangent there, but I'll
No,
pause.
as I mentioned to you that the meetup where, you shared this diagram and you talked and you pulled out, lovable and you did vibe coding right there on the screen in front of us. I mean, it just made it seem so attainable. Because this all can be so incredibly overwhelming. Um, I am trying to follow as much as I can, right? We all have day jobs, or we're trying to keep up and keep moving forward. And we hear this vague directive, like you need to upskill, you need to learn more. And to me, it's like, how do you grab onto that? What does that word even mean?
Yeah,
So, and like, does that differ between technical people and non-technical people? Can you
yeah.
kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great question. First of all, like, the advice that I get all the time where heard others give is, hey, you need to upskill in AI. But what does that mean, right? To me, upskilling is building, right? And I'll give you a specific example. When I was building using machine learning, traditional things like hard code using Python, and that skill set was different, right? But then once generative AI was introduced, I think I just had this envision, like I would, as you know, agilist by heart, right? I would think about, okay, what's the vision of like building something, right? Even something small, like a chatbot. My first project in Gen AI was just building a chatbot. And I've actually demoed like the very infancies of what I built was Agile GPT back in the day. But that it was a simple chatbot that I built with generative AI, right? Just being able to talk in natural language and then putting the pieces together myself, right? Not asking anyone else the questions except me and my AI assistant per se, right? And that at that point it was just ChatGPT. And I literally built an entire chatbot that I was able to demo in different places. So to me, it's just, you know, when we say upskilling, it's not necessarily, I think it's still vital to learn, right? I think learning should continue, but you have to like, tie that with some type of practicality, right? Otherwise, you're not gonna like whatever you learn, you're not really, it's like taking an exam, like, and if you don't write things down on paper, it doesn't stick, right? And it's the same thing. If you learn and take these classes and go to conferences and, kind of absorb information, that it doesn't get translated into something practical until you do it. And that's just been my philosophy. And that's to me, that's the definition of how I define upskilling, right? Yes, all the conferences and the courses are great, but how are you applying that? And to the future workforce and all these companies, that's what they're looking for is what value are you generating? What are you building? Like the number one, I think, hiring thing that's going to happen is we're going to probably see something like a GitHub for non-technical folks, a portfolio of what even prototypes have you built using vibe coding, right? So to me, it's just a matter of time, but I'm seeing the shift happen. Like I'm seeing people even non-technical folks, like many that might be on this call, or even if you're technical, it's like you still have that long spectrum. There's so much things to still be discovered. And I think in order for us to make even those breakthrough discoveries, it's going to be people, someone from even this room, right? That might actually build at the application layer. Because it's like this. This is the analogy I'll give. Everyone has a brain, but you have to use the brain, right? So it's that, and I think it's the same thing with AI. Like, we have all the models. That's the brain. But now we have to figure out how do we leverage that model to build whatever application we're building.
Yeah, those are the skills of, I want to say the future, but the future is now. So those are the skills that we need, and those are the skills that are going to make you valuable as an employee moving forward. Um, I've been posting over the past few days on LinkedIn about vibe coding. I know this is something that you're a big proponent of. So I want to dig into that a little bit more for a number of reasons. Not only like defining what it is, but I love a good controversy. Like, what's the controversy around this?
Yeah.
Because even like this morning, I saw somebody post on LinkedIn, and this reminded me so much. And some of you that have known me a long time, like, are like, oh my gosh, like she's saying this again. Like the technical versus the non-technical people argument. Like, if you're not technical, don't go near vibe coding because you don't know what you're doing. And um, I dealt with that a lot as a non-technical Scrum Master. I had to put on my big girl panties, like so to speak, right? And push back against the people that were saying that to me, like you don't belong here because you're non-technical. And yeah, it was challenging for me. Like I make no bones about that, but I bring a lot of skills to the table as well, even as I'm non-technical. Um, so I'm like, oh my gosh, are we going to get into that LinkedIn argument again, like technical versus non-technical vibe coders? And I'm like, I
Yeah.
almost inserted myself into this post, but I didn't. I'm like, I can't argue this stuff anymore. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's so technical versus non-technical. I think that definition is slowly going to kind of completely dissociate because to me, how do you become like, a non-technical person can become technical, right? It's the matter of effort that you put in, right? It's the matter of a non-technical person actually doing and learning. And like I said, it's that whole spectrum of learning something, applying it, and then moving on. I mean, that's how you become technical, right? Is actually taking a stab at building something. And to me, that the the opportunity of building, like, it was complex. It was made for technical people, but now we're actually using English language. So a lot of the skill sets that we have, whether you're a product person, whether you're a scrum master, coming from an agile background or a project manager, right? You still have some skill sets that you could possibly use to, prompt these, vibe coding tools in a way to build something, right? And I think that translation is going to get better and better, right? To the point where you do have a Jarvis at some point that's saying, "Hey, Jarvis, go make me this," right? So, there's a skill set in that too. And to me, there's the controversy is this, right? Like a lot of the technical folks will say, don't do vibe coding because there's security concerns. There's things that you might not catch in terms of authentication and the guardrails, right? Which I think it's an important conversation to have. But I think a non-technical person can actually build that Lego block, right? Build the skill sets to understand. Not that you need to know or go deep into it, right? You just need to know what, like, for example, if you're building an application or a website, what are some of the authentication protocols that you need to understand, right? So that you could then prompt that vibe coding tool to make sure, or even understand ask the AI to say, hey, what is it that you just built, right? And can we break that down, right? So that way, so it's not like you have to be able to actually write it out and do it. It's really understanding that building block, right, of the guardrail. So to me, I think the controversy is going to be there of technical versus non-technical, but I think that's going to blur at some point because everyone will be able to, rise to that level where building is going to become so easy that, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the market even react to that, right? A lot of companies are saying, "Hey, engineers, you need to start, focusing on less coding because majority of the code is AI generated, right? And it's going to get better. We'll get to the point where almost, I would say 99.9% everything is coded by an AI. So then what do engineers do?" Right? And actually, it's the reverse. The engineers, to me, are going to do the non-technical stuff that non-technical folks are doing now, right? So it's like we have the technical folks that are upskilling, but they're gonna actually have to learn what we have right now. And we don't really have to learn what they know, but it's gonna come down to that point where I think a lot of the skill sets that a lot of the non-technical folks display today are actually very relevant in terms of what's happening now.
Yeah, and I found, as I mentioned, like as a non-technical scrum master going into a software development team, right, there was a lot that I didn't understand, but I brought so much to the table. Um, I tapped into my skill sets because I couldn't understand those technical conversations. So I trained myself to look for other things, communication, conflict resolution, like all of these things that were touted as skills that Scrum Masters were supposed to have. I leaned into those and I found a lot of success. So I I hear what you're saying here. I think it's the getting over maybe the fear or the scariness to just start doing it.
Yeah,
That's kind of what it is. But I see the potential for, communication skills and English language skills and giving directions to a person, right?
yes,
Versus towards an AI, but it's really like the same thing because it's like your assistant. You have to be able to give it really good directions to get it to do the thing you need it to do. And
absolutely.
that's where people are going to shine.
Yeah.
Um, so I I feel like I'll get there. I'll
I think
get there.
everyone will get there, right? It's just a matter of incremental, like, trying. If you try today and if it doesn't work, try again, right? It's building on that. And literally, I'll give the analogy now. It's like Lego building blocks, right? the chatbot can be like a brick of a size of like, if you look at a Lego brick, they have, different sizes, right? So it could be that today you're working on a very small brick, and that could be building just a chatbot with, tying an API to an LLM today, right? But tomorrow you're gonna build on top of that. You're gonna add another building block, and tomorrow's block may be that, hey, I want to add voice to this. So how am I going to add voice capabilities, and what do I need to learn in order to add that? And then
Yeah.
at the day after that, it could be adding the MCP block that I was talking about. How do you leverage more context within your application? So you add that MCP. So at the end of the day, and then you take it on further, right? How do I change? Now I have a chatbot that can function with my MCP server, which is Model Context Protocol for those of you who don't know, and it just gives more access for your chatbot to tap into data and tools. So once you have that set in place, the next thing might be, okay, well, how do I now take this chatbot and convert it, add another brick of agents, right? Like how do I make it agentic to do actual tasks, right? And it's not just question and answer. So at the end of the day, now you have a very complex Lego brick, right? That you could probably still keep building, but it's important for you to start somewhere. Start with a small brick first, right? And there are other small bricks that you can possibly, build. But to me, that builder analogy is so relevant. And those who want to know more, I think Andrew Ng just posted that about that today, so it's very timely. But it's important that we learn all of those bricks and keep building because open source is, going to be the win. And a lot of these, after these companies kind of build their pieces, open source is just adding, they're adding more and more bricks every day. I guarantee you there's no one in the world that has messed with every single brick or has built every single brick yet, right? So think about that. Like if you just go to Hugging Face and look at how much they have to offer open source wise, there's no one that has built with every single piece yet. And people are still building their pieces. And at some point, we're going to be able to put all the pieces together to kind of, solve some of the world's, toughest problems that need to be solved.
Yep. One of and I mentioned this to you, on one of our one-on-one chats, but one of the things that I appreciate about you is your energy and your attitude, because it's very easy to go down this gloom and doom pathway, especially when you start looking at things that are going on in the news, right? And your brain gets so overwhelmed with all that you're reading, and it's very easy for the human mind to go down to the negative. We've all seen like Ready Player One. We've all seen, we've read The Terminator, etc. Um, but I appreciate the mindset that you bring to this because, from my perspective, we have a choice here. We can think of things in a very negative way, or we can think of things in a positive way. They're going to happen whether we want them or not. We have no control over it. So are we going to make this easy on ourselves or not mentally? And that's why I think it's really important to control what's going in your brain and talk to people that see a positive outlook for the future.
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about why you've chosen that mindset? Maybe it's just your personality,
Yeah.
but like, why have you chosen that mindset as opposed to going down this path of like, the world's going to blow up next year and we're all going to die?
Yeah, so I think that mindset that I have comes, I have always been a builder myself, right? And learning through building. And I will emphasize that throughout the entire conversation because that's given me the mindset to keep exploring, right? And also, I know there's a lot of controversy right now. I always say this, look, even the smartest and brightest in AI don't know where this is going, right? But there's a spectrum. There are those who are on the very front end of the spectrum, right? And to me, it's important to listen to what they're doing, right? Like I called out that people are going to start talking about super intelligence, yet we haven't even defined AGI yet, right? And so, like, there's a lot of noise, but to find signal, you have to really, take everyone, what everyone's saying, even the top scientists, but there's something that they know. I'm convinced that a lot of these folks, because I've met a couple of them, I've talked to them one on one, like Andrew Ying, all of these folks that are like up there. And one thing that's resonated to me is, yeah, some people say, oh, it's a capitalistic world, they have a lot of money, so it's like geared towards money. But at the other spectrum of it, everyone is saying that, there is something because like otherwise I don't think like sometimes I feel like if it's one person that's like completely cuckoo and off and saying that the world's gonna end, makes sense. But when you have like 7 or 8 people kind of piling up on that and kind of supporting that narrative in some aspect, there could be slight truth to that. Not saying that it's 100% accurate, but there's a learning there, right? Like what's making all of them kind of say that? And that has to be because they have built a bunch of Lego pieces already, right? They've already gotten to the Lego piece that's like pretty solid and complex, while our Lego pieces are just small, small enough to just understand the picture that we're painting. But because of that, their experience in building, they're to that point to kind of say and raise alarms, right? Saying that, hey, we're already here, right? And so I know there's a lot of doomsday, like, Anthropic CEO kind of saying that a lot of things will, and he's kind of there's controversy even within that community, right? Like even within that, Jensen doesn't agree with Dario on Anthropic. So if you look at it, just these, it's important to understand these debates and kind of track them, but don't look into it too much, right? Because if you start looking into it too much, you're not going to start. And the biggest hurdle is to start. You just have to start somewhere, right? Just take one small step, right? And then learn from it. And it's not, I guarantee you, if you start trying to make a chatbot yourself, nothing's gonna break, the world's not gonna end, right? But you will definitely learn something from it. I guarantee you that. And to me, that's the narrative that I push, and that's the mindset that I have that I'm trying to teach others, right? Saying that don't be scared, right? There's nothing to lose, right? And to be honest with you, I think a lot of this comes from even the trickles of the agile community being so like I mentioned this to you, Patty. Like I feel like there's so much negativity in the community, right? When I go to this AI world and I go to SF and startup community, there's so much positivity because everyone's building. Everyone's like, "Hey, let
Yes.
me help you out, right? Let me help you out here. Let me help you kind of do this." And I don't see that. And I think, that's kind of part of the reason why I'm trying to like, disconnect myself with the community that's still trying to find and figure out and debating on LinkedIn and it's just so much negativity there. Like, why focus the energy there when you have this AI community that's there to help you? I guarantee if you go to SF and you go to any meetup event and say that I need help with AI, you will have 20 people behind you trying to help you because they're all trying to do the same thing, right? And I know I'm kind of biased. I love SF and I love the West Coast, but I feel the energy. Like there's something about the energy that's unmatched, right? And I'm trying to replicate that here in the East Coast where I live in Baltimore, but it's difficult, right? It's very difficult to really replicate that energy. But I am in the mindset that at some point we'll be able to find builders here too, right? It's just developing that community and helping each other out, right? If you're stuck, feel free to reach out, right? I have my QR code if anyone wants, if you're stuck building and you need help, I'll jump in. I'll jump in and help you wherever you're stuck because to me, I think it's essential for everyone to recognize that building is going to get easier than it is today. And if you start today, a year from now, you will have something extraordinary.
Yep. I love that. And I love that you brought up kind of tying back to like one of the original questions about why you left the Agile community. I've experienced the same thing, right? I'm now putting out different content. It's focused on, educating people, foundational, kind of like I did with Scrum, but now I'm doing it with AI. And I've part of the reason why I stopped posting on LinkedIn, I just got so fed up with it because I felt like every time I put a post out there or a comment on somebody's post, somebody would come along and like backhand me or like argue with me. And now that I'm posting on people's AI posts, I'm not getting any of that. So that fear, that impediment, a good agile word there, that was put up in my way, that I put up in my way, that stopped me from posting on LinkedIn. Um, I'm not experiencing that anymore, and it's so refreshing.
Yeah.
So, um, I just wanted to point that out. Um, the last thing before we get to questions from the audience very quickly. So you obviously have a positive mindset about where things are going in the future. And again, I'm always like, you can pick which way to think, bad or good. Let's pick good because we can't control what's going to happen
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned like we're not gonna head for mass layoffs, right? Because that's a big narrative in the news, and it's something I've had to shut off in my own brain. But so if we're not headed, I know there's going to be a readjustment and it's going to be uncomfortable, but like if we're not heading for the mass layoffs, like everybody's going to be unemployed, where do you see things going with software engineering?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So I think there will be layoffs, right? I'm not saying that, I mean, we're seeing it now, right? But at the same time, there's going to be an abundance of a new, new career category that erupts, and it's already erupting. I'm seeing it already. So for those Agilists, I'm seeing like AI, I just saw someone post a posting on, a AI change lead, whatever that means, right? So you'll see some of the roles repackaged, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be where, yes, the engineers who are not like software engineering people who are not adapting to, generative AI and what's happening in terms of the stack and how things are moving. The thing is, those folks will probably most likely not make it if they don't, again, start building with this new Lego blocks, right? So if you, I mean, yes, they have the skill sets, they have the, foundational Lego pieces, but you need to add the AI Lego pieces to your complex building block, right? And to me, those are the folks that are going to have some trouble, but layoffs are going to happen, and we've seen layoffs every time something massive has happened in the technology landscape. But I don't think that should shy anyone away or having the fear that my job's going to be taken. I know the market's hard, and the market is very, very tough in terms of finding a job today because there's so much noise, right? You have AI generated resumes. You have, obviously companies trying to, CEOs trying to say AI first, right? And humans second, right? In that sense. So you're dealing with that. And then you're just dealing with the economic conditions, right? I think, AI in general is making mass shifts, but I think with all of that, you need to find signal. And the only way you can find signal, again, I'll say it again, is if you're building, and I'll say this, if you're building, if you're going to build starting today, build in public. Share what you got to build, because then you can toot your horn and say, I built it, right? And that is a differentiator than the 5,000 resumes that are sitting in someone's pile, right? And go network. Like I think Patty's event, hosting this meetup, network with folks, connect here, meet with them one on one, because that's what's going to differentiate you, right? The human touch is still going to be there. I don't care what people say about that. Like I have gotten all of my stuff from networking and showing people who I am, and just meeting with people, because at the end of the day, people are still making decisions whether you get that job or not. Yeah, now Meta may go against that. There, I think they're trying to leverage AI to make that decision as well, and that's okay, right? But I think you have to start somewhere, and to me, it's just, it's an important thing that you continue to build and build that momentum.
Excellent. Well, that was an amazing way to wrap this up. Um, I I agree with you on everything that you said. Um, and that's part of why I've pivoted myself. And I've decided to go through the uncomfortable journey of putting my AI exploration and everything out there for the public on LinkedIn. Because to your point, people will see it. They will start to interact with you. They will start to notice you. It does take a lot of courage, but it worked the first time around when I was trying to pivot to the Scrum Master and Agile coach role. So I decided to do this again, but it is super uncomfortable. And having community around you, such as this one, makes it a lot easier. because we are all in this together, and that sounds very, I always say Aquarius and like let's hold hands and like sing songs, but really it is. We're in this together, and we can do more together than divided. So,
Absolutely.
any last thought or statement before we take some questions from the audience?
I think I'll leave people with this, right? Yes, there's a lot of noise in this world right now, and everyone's hurting, right? Companies hurting, people not being able to find. But I think you should definitely try to find some positivity. And trust me, when I say if once you start building, it's going to be an addiction. You're gonna want to do more and more of it. And I think that's the mindset. Build, be very, I think, rebellious in that, right? Like if you're saying hey, like I'll give you an example since there's a lot of Agilists in this room saying, hey, this I hate Jira and I don't like working with Jira. Well, guess what? You can build your own, vibe code it, use Replit, use Lovable, and try to build your internal tool and just see the magic that happens. You will be shocked and amazed. And it might not be perfect. It's not going to be like you're going to go sell this tool at a production level and make a company out of it. But think about it. Even as a person, like, for your personal needs, if you start building and it helps you improve your productivity, that's a win. So I'll leave it at that. But thanks everyone for joining. Really, really appreciate you guys all spending your time. And Patty, thank you so much for
Amazing.
having me. I think this conversation was great.
Yes. Um, all right. Well, we have a handful of minutes here to take some questions from the audience. So whoever wants to come off camera, come off mute. And it doesn't even have to be a question. It could be a comment. Give us your thoughts.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Absolutely. Hello.
I know I should not be driving and doing this, but I didn't want to miss the meeting, so I'm almost home. But I just wanted to thank you. I'm not an Agilist. I'm in a like product design, learning design space, but I really wanted to hear this conversation and I've learned a lot. One thing I would like to say is just thank you for having the conversation. And I feel really motivated to continue with a growth mindset. But I wanted to ask the question if there is like a shareable document of different tools and resources that we can begin to play with, because you were like calling out a lot of different tools and I'm like, I don't have my pen and paper. And
And
I
you're
want to
driving.
try some of those, and I'm driving and I want to try some of those out. In my space, there's definitely a lot of work that is pushing us to do prompt engineering and fine tuning and creating using generative AI. And I was skeptical at first, but it's been very exciting. I have created some assistants, but I need to continue growing. But I just feel like there's so many tools. So if there's just like a place to start with a list of tools, do you have something you can share?
I just shared it in the chat bot, AIlearningclub.org. That's something that I
Okay.
created. And
Ooh.
I update those resources. There's like free courses on there, there's tools on there, and I'm actually trying to update the tools that I play with. These are tools that I'm using to build my building blocks, but as I build them, I try to share as much as I can. And so that's a great resource if you're looking for. I try to update that as frequently as possible.
Okay, I'm gonna hop right on that. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
All right. Who else we got?
Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
Hey,
hey,
I'm Ange.
Ange.
How's everybody? I just want to say that your energy is so amazing and it's really great because I'm in this weird space where I'm in ed tech and I haven't seen any companies that I've worked for that actually are embracing it. They're not even talking about it. And I'm in technology companies. So I've been quietly using it to write my requirements because I was working for a waterfall company. I know it's like a bad word, but I'm like, I don't even remember how to write that way. So I needed something to kind of help me go through. So I know you're saying like, that's not really how you should use it. Um, but what's interesting is over the past few days, because I lost my job on Monday, um, I'm really excited, honestly, and I'm scared to death because I have no job and no income. But this whole Gen I space is sort of unleashed like a creativity that I didn't know I had. Like I'm like, I always tell people I'm not an artist. I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to paint, but this sort of stuff creates it taps into a creative side that I don't think people understand, that it's a creative side. And, you know, like I was always a wannabe developer, but never reached that point, which is why I went to business analysis and product management. But I still feel like I'm sort of in that space when I'm using it because, you know, I can real talk with it. But I just want to say this was a really, really great meetup because you just even like got me even more excited, like during a time when I should be in my bed, like, you know, curled up in a ball.
Fantastic.
See, I told you, like, I'm not the only one that sees this.
Yeah.
You radiate this positivity, and that's why I'm like, I've got to have him on here because we need some. Like, there's so much craziness going on out in the world.
Yeah.
We need
Right.
to, yeah.
But
We,
I love what you said, Angie, the creativity, right? It's unbelievable what you'll tap into, right? And you're just getting started. So I mean like I would love to kind of meet up with, like a month from now and see what you're doing because I think like even kids, right? Like Hugging Face's co-founder had a meetup event with 9 to 13-year-olds using Lovable and they vibe coded apps and you see the kids' creativity is at another level. But if they can do it, why can't we, right? I mean, that's the energy I think we should have, right? It's even,
So
yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to take up the conversation because this topic that I'm going to talk about really quickly is really massive to me. So I'm like, you know, in there and I'm in ChatGPT all the time, and my kids are 9 and 11, but they keep telling me, "Oh, ChatGPT, all that stuff is really bad. Don't ever use it." So a big conversation here, but like I'm concerned that in schools they haven't figured out how to work that whole curriculum into their practice every day, and I'm concerned that kids are now going to start thinking like, oh, that's a bad thing, you know, like we can't use that, and then they're going to lose out on their skills. So I'm sorry, that's a really big conversation, but that's what has been in my mind for a couple of weeks now, actually, is like how do we how do I teach my kids that it's okay, but like, yeah, you should probably follow school too. Like I'm all
yeah.
over the place, but that's a a conversation for another day. But I'm impressed to hear that other kids are embracing it. So that's good to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, I'm a former teacher. I'm once a teacher, always a teacher. I'm always educating, but you know, I was a former classroom teacher, and I just wrote about Duolingo the other day, and I'm hoping to see if I can connect with somebody that I can bring on this meetup and talk about the state of education and where education is going. I'm trying to like expand my feelers out into the LinkedIn verse, so it is on my mind to find somebody. So if anybody knows anybody that's like in this space, please connect me with them. All right. Well, we are at time. A lot of us do have to go back, myself included, have a meeting at the top of the hour here. So I just want to thank you all for coming. This was an amazing conversation. I wish we could just continue on, but it is time to say goodbye. So thank you. Any last thank you or anything to wrap us up, and we'll sign off here.
Great, thank you.
Thank
And
you,
I did
everyone.
put a link to a Substack for a lady who is doing exciting things. And she's also on LinkedIn. She's just a blast.
Fortune is really awesome, actually. I know her too.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Snehal.
Thanks,
Well,
everyone.
I will be sending this out again in my newsletter on it'll probably be Tuesday of next week because I'm going on vacation on Tuesday afternoon. But I will see you all next time. Have a
Sounds
great
good.
rest of your week.
All right,
Thanks,
see you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
Thank
so
you.
much.